This is the story of Ethan Miles, a 21-year-old student at Liberty University. On the night of April 11th, while Ethan was kneeling in prayer in his dorm room, his heart stopped. He was clinically dead for 9 minutes. Before that tragic moment, Ethan's life was full of activity and purpose, though not always in a negative way. As a political science major, Ethan was deeply rooted in faith, having grown up with God woven into every aspect of his life. His father is a pastor, and his mother leads worship at their church. At college, Ethan believed he was following the path laid out for him. He led a small group for freshmen, volunteered for outreach programs, and spent much of his time online defending his beliefs. Among the voices he followed was Charlie Kirk, whose clarity and strength Ethan admired greatly. Ethan wanted to embody that same fearlessness in his own life. That particular day had been especially challenging for Ethan. There was an open forum debate on campus about faith and politics, and the discussion quickly turned heated. A girl from the opposing side stood up, her voice trembling with anger, and accused Christian conservatives like Ethan of being the source of hate in the country. Ethan didn't back down. He rose to his feet, armed with answers, Bible verses, and well-rehearsed talking points. He defended his beliefs and the leaders he respected. Many might say he won the argument, but as Ethan walked back to his dorm, he didn't feel victorious. Instead, he felt empty and exhausted. The noise of the debate lingered in his mind, refusing to fade. That night, Ethan knelt by his bed to pray. He thought of his mother, who always described prayer as simply talking to God like a friend. Yet, Ethan's prayers felt more like formal reports. He was listing to God all the wrongs in the world, pleading for him to fix the other side. As he prayed, a sharp, crushing pain suddenly shot through his chest, like a bolt of lightning. Ethan tried to call out to his roommate, Mark, but no sound escaped his lips. His vision blurred, the edges darkening, and all he could think of was the familiar smell of the old wooden pews in his father's church on a Sunday morning. Then, everything went silent. There was no more pain, no fear, no noise from the day. Ethan found himself floating. Looking down, he saw his own body collapsed on the floor of his dorm room. Mark, his roommate, was on the phone, his face pale as he shouted the address to a 911 operator. It was surreal for Ethan to witness this scene. There was no panic within him. It felt like watching a movie about someone else's life. He saw the paramedics rush into the room. A few minutes later, they placed paddles on his chest, and he saw his body jolt, though he felt nothing. Then, a gentle pull tugged at him, not forceful, but like an invitation. Ethan turned away from the chaotic scene in his room and noticed a small pinprick of light in the distance. The space around him was dark, but it wasn't frightening. It was a peaceful, restful darkness. As Ethan moved toward the light, he heard a faint melody, one he couldn't quite recognize. Woven into the sound was his mother's voice, clear as day, whispering, "Jesus, please, my boy, Jesus, please." Her prayers seemed to guide him forward like a lifeline. The light grew larger, soon enveloping him completely. It wasn't a harsh, blinding light. It was warm, like the first day of spring after a long, cold winter. Ethan was no longer in a tunnel. He found himself standing in a field, though the grass wasn't the usual green. It was a color he couldn't name, glowing with a life of its own. The sky above shimmered like a swirling pearl, with hues of gold, rose, and a blue so deep it felt endless. A low, beautiful hum filled the air, a sound of pure peace, a sound that assured him everything was okay. For the first time in his life, Ethan's mind was completely silent. There were no arguments, no worries, no need to have the last word. just stillness. Tears welled in his eyes, not from sadness, but from overwhelming relief. It was as if he were a soldier who had just been told the war was over. Then from the center of the light, Ethan saw someone approaching. This figure didn't walk on the glowing grass. Rather, the grass seemed to bow beneath him. He wasn't draped in a brilliant white robe or glowing too brightly to look at. He was simply there, and his presence transformed the very air Ethan breathed. The air became love, became life itself. Ethan knew instantly, it was Jesus. As Jesus drew closer, Ethan saw his face, his eyes. Those eyes held the sorrow of 1,000 lifetimes and the joy of 1,000,000,000 sunrises, all at once. There was no judgment in them, not even a hint. When Jesus looked at Ethan, the walls Ethan had built around his heart, pride, the need to always be right, simply melted away. It didn't feel like Jesus was exposing Ethan's secrets. It felt like he was reminding Ethan of who he truly was before he had forgotten. Overwhelmed, Ethan fell to his knees, unable to stand, and wept into the glowing grass. All his life, Ethan had fought for Jesus, never realizing that all Jesus wanted was for him to rest in him. Jesus didn't say, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." He simply stood there, allowing Ethan to cry. After a moment that felt both eternal and instantaneous, Jesus spoke. His voice wasn't loud or commanding. It was as quiet as a thought in one's mind, yet more real than anything Ethan had ever heard. He said, "Ethan, you defended my name, but you did not always defend my heart." The words didn't crush Ethan. They brought clarity. Jesus reached down, and it felt as though he touched Ethan's mind. Suddenly, the field vanished, and Ethan was seeing scenes from his own life flash before him. Ethan saw himself at his laptop, fingers racing across the keyboard, posting angry comments in a political forum. He saw the satisfaction on his face as he used a Bible verse to shut down an opponent, but he also saw the hurt and confusion on the other person's face through their screen. He saw himself at protests, holding a sign about truth, but his jaw was tight with anger. He saw prayer meetings where the group spent more time praying against their enemies than for them. It was a flood of images, Christians arguing with Christians, believers mocking those who were lost. They were all using the right words: truth, righteousness, revival. But behind those words was often pride, the desire to win, the spirit of the world. Then Jesus took Ethan to another place. They stood in a vast dark space, and below them was a map of America. It wasn't made of states or cities, but of light and shadow, wrestling and swirling together like smoke. Jesus pointed to one side, where Ethan saw massive crowds filling stadiums. They chanted, "Truth, truth, we want truth." Their faces were passionate and determined, holding Bibles, but their expressions were hard. Their eyes narrowed with suspicion and rage. They were searching for enemies. Then Jesus showed Ethan the other side. There were parades and gatherings there as well, with people shouting, "Love, love is love." They smiled and celebrated, but as Ethan looked closer, he saw them mocking a cross, tearing pages from a Bible and laughing. Their love left no room for holiness, no room for the God who is love. Ethan's heart ached at the sight. He looked at Jesus, who gazed at the map not with anger, but with profound sadness. Jesus said, "America no longer knows the difference between conviction and cruelty. They have forgotten that my truth must be spoken with my love, and my love is defined by my truth. They cannot be separated." Then Jesus pointed again, and a single platform rose from the darkness. Standing on it was Charlie Kirk, speaking to a massive crowd about revival, about taking the country back for God. His passion stirred the crowd, who roared in response. He said things Ethan himself had believed and spoken. But then Ethan saw something chilling. Behind the stage, in the crowd, and all around were thousands upon thousands of angels. They weren't cheering or clapping. They weren't even smiling. They stood silent, their faces unreadable, simply watching and waiting. Confused, Ethan whispered, "Lord, why aren't they celebrating? This is a move of God, isn't it?" Jesus turned to Ethan, the sadness in his eyes deeper than the ocean. He said, "Many of my servants speak truth boldly. They build great platforms and gather great crowds, but few stop to listen for my voice first. Tell them this: I do not bless division disguised as zeal. I do not anoint pride. A revival born from human anger will burn like straw and vanish in the wind. A revival born from a broken and contrite heart, that is the fire that will purify a nation." Jesus paused, and the vision of the stage faded. Then he showed Ethan two final visions, two possible futures for America. In the first, Ethan saw believers on their knees, not in stadiums, but in their living rooms, closets, and small churches. They were weeping, repenting not for the nation's sins, but for their own pride, anger, and lack of love. He saw pastors from different denominations washing each other's feet, and political rivals meeting in secret to pray for one another. From this place of humility, a light began to grow. It wasn't a political victory, it was a holy fire. It started small, spreading from heart to heart, family to family, until the darkness began to recede. Then Jesus showed Ethan the other path, and it was terrifying. He saw the same stadiums and crowds, but the anger had intensified. Political lines divided churches, and people chose their party over their Savior. Pastors endorsed candidates from the pulpit as congregations fractured. Online, Christians tore each other apart over policies and presidents. Then Ethan saw churches burning, Christian leaders falling into scandal one after another, consumed by the power they sought. Everyone pointed fingers, blaming the other side, blaming the world, blaming each other. In the smoke-filled distance, crosses glowed faintly, symbols of a faith abandoned for a lesser kingdom. Jesus looked at Ethan, his eyes pleading. "America's greatest battle will not be between left and right," he said, his voice echoing in Ethan's soul. "It will be between those who love power and those who love me." Unable to bear it, Ethan fell at Jesus' feet once more. He begged to stay there, pleading, "Please, Lord, don't send me back. It's too loud there, too broken. I'm so tired of the fighting. I just want to stay here in your peace." Ethan meant every word. He longed to remain in that place of stillness forever. Jesus knelt down, and for the first time Ethan felt his touch on his shoulder. It wasn't a physical hand, but a feeling of pure, unconditional strength and comfort, like a father's touch. Jesus smiled gently and said, "Ethan, your work is not done. You were a soldier, but now I am sending you back as a peacemaker. Go and tell them what you have seen. Tell them to love one another. Tell them to listen for my voice in the quiet. Their true enemy is not the person with a different opinion. Their true enemy is the pride in their own hearts." Ethan whispered, "I can't. They won't listen to me." Jesus reassured him, "You will not be alone. Now go." Suddenly, Ethan felt a rushing wind, not violent, but like a deep breath being pulled back into a body. The field of light, the pearly sky, Jesus' face, all began to fade, swirling away like a dream. Ethan gasped as a fiery ache seared through his chest. The next thing he felt was the blinding, sterile light of a hospital room. The beeping of machines was deafening, and someone screamed his name. It was his mother, holding his hand, her face drenched with tears. A doctor shone a light into Ethan's eyes, asking, "Ethan, can you hear me? Squeeze my hand if you can hear me." Ethan tried, but his body felt heavy and unfamiliar. He shivered uncontrollably. Having left the warmth of heaven, his body felt impossibly cold. He wept, not with the silent, peaceful tears of before, but with loud, ragged sobs of a man who felt exiled from home. The doctors couldn't explain what happened. 9 minutes without a heartbeat, no oxygen to the brain. They had warned Ethan's parents to prepare for severe brain damage if he even woke up. Yet every test came back normal. They called it a medical anomaly, a 1 in a million fluke. Ethan's mother just kept whispering, "Thank you, Jesus." She knew the truth. Ethan spent days in the hospital, mostly in silence. How could he explain what he had seen? How could he describe the color of that grass, the sound of that peace, or the look in Jesus' eyes? How could he tell people that the culture war they were so invested in was breaking God's heart? But Jesus had told him to go and tell, so that's what Ethan resolved to do. Ethan's message isn't about who to vote for or which leader to follow. That's not the point. Jesus didn't show Ethan a political party in heaven. He showed him a hurting family. What Ethan learned in those 9 minutes is that God's voice isn't in the shouting, the angry tweets, or the viral sermon clips. It's in the stillness, in the quiet whisper that urges one to pray for an enemy, to forgive someone who has hurt them, to choose humility even when every instinct screams to be right. America's greatest battle isn't out there in the world. It's within each heart, Ethan's included. It's the daily choice between loving power and loving Him, between building a personal kingdom or God's kingdom. So, Ethan asks just one thing before posting a comment, sharing an article, or speaking out. Stop. Get quiet and listen. Ask, "Lord, is this your heart? Is this truth spoken with your love?" Because heaven is real, Jesus is alive, and He is weeping for a church that has learned to fight but has forgotten how to love.